Today, on Energy Contact, the thief thinks that everybody's trying to steal from him, while the murderer thinks that everybody's out to kill him. Meanwhile, good people always find a way to find the good in others. Everything that we see, we take in through our own filter, our own perspective. It shapes our personality, our body, mind, spirit, emotion, intellect, ego, everything. What do you see in people? And what do they see in you? And what does it have to do with your health, your growth, and your happiness? That's what's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry, and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. We love to categorize and dissect and separate and parse these things out, but there's just no difference. And all that health and growth and self-improvement we're talking about, in fact, take place when we do just the opposite, when we combine these things, when we put them together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that is thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. Let's move right ahead with that, and let's bring up our slide. Everyone, please know that I am not a doctor. This show is in no way a medical advice show, and if you're looking for medical advice, you're in the wrong place. I might call myself an energy healer, a chakra healer, so might a lot of other people. But it's important to know that state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. There's important information on this slide, and we're going to leave it up for a few seconds. I'll ask you to please read it carefully and with awareness. But when you've kind of got it down, if you would, please locate a pencil and paper. Here's why. At the end of this show, we're going to run some credits, and on those credits, there's going to be contact information for me. I invite and encourage you to contact me. I hope you will. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. In order to get that information, you're going to need a pencil and paper. Now, there'll be plenty of time to look at it and write it down at the end of the show, if you've got your pencil and paper handy. So please go get that now. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 44. If you're tuning in for the first time today, thank you. Thanks and welcome. These shows are sequential. They build. So if it's your first time, there's some ramp-up stuff, some up-to-speed things that you will have missed out on. However, I'm doing my very best to make each show have great value on a standalone basis, and I believe this show does. If it is your first time, and if what you see today piques your interest, then please look around. There will be earlier shows re-airing later, either right here on this channel or perhaps in the different cable areas where your different friends might live. And if you'll look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now is the time of the show where I'm going to bring my co-host on. Let's get Slim on camera. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we have to understand a few things. My friend Slim here is going to help us understand those things. We have to understand something about energy, and this show is certainly a show about energy. But that energy out there somewhere does us no good whatsoever. It does us no good until we understand what it is that energy contacts. My friend Slim here is to help us understand what it is that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. You go to the funeral home and see them all day long. Energy without a body might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. Let's move ahead. Previously on Energy Contact, we have been studying the body intellect and the anatomy that it builds. We've seen how the same things in our brain that give us thought, memory, reason, recall, logic, intellect, all those things we think of as brain functions, we've seen they are in fact in every cell of our body. And it is that body intellect that builds us. We've seen that thought builds anatomy. Furthermore, we have seen that 1 billion different people, all made up of the exact same atoms, the exact same components that are identical in every way, these billion people will build themselves in 1 billion different ways. Here recently, we've been looking at healthcare systems and we've been comparing two schools of thought. Conventional medicine, otherwise known as Western medicine, allopathic medicine, standard medicine, things like that. This is the stuff that you go to your doctor for, the things your health care plan covers. This is the medicine with its roots in the work of René Descartes and Francis Bacon and the scientific method. All that stuff from the turn of the 1600s. And on the other hand, there is alternative medicine, which we also call holistic medicine, complementary medicine, naturopathic medicine, among other things. These are the herbs and the supplements, the things you get at your healthy food store, the things that your doctor will not endorse and your health plan will not pay for. We've seen that while we refer to the term medical science a lot, and we refer to it a lot with standard medicine, but even with the alternative stuff, we've seen that when you peel back the layers, that neither of these systems is very scientific at all. Not really in the strict sense of what we call science. And all along, we've been looking at that old mysterious energy that those old Indian mystics and yogis and swamis and stuff referred to as Kundalini energy. So today, we're continuing to look at health and healing. Now that we've seen how the different medical and healing practices are evolved and how they separated from one another, coming from diverse perspectives and going down divergent paths, we've spent a few weeks now looking at healers from our perspective. Today, we're going to look at us from our healer's perspective. If you are under their care, that's a very important perspective to understand. And because they're human, we're going to see that our healer's views are limited. And that's fine in theory. It's fine in theory until it starts to affect your health, your growth, and your self-improvement. Also today, we have to take a look at ourselves, because we really can't consider the people who heal us without considering ourselves. Because ultimately, you are your ultimate caregiver. All right, so now everybody take a break for a second, because now we've reached the point in our show where we're going to take our virtual field trip. We're going to take our little journey in our mind's eye like we do every show. And today, we've gotten an assignment. We have a job where we have to repair somebody's house. We don't know what the problem is. We just know that things aren't working right. And we can't figure out what it is, and neither can anybody else. And I'm going to assume for this visualization that you're like me and you're not much on home improvement things. And so what we have to do is call an array of experts. All right, so the first person in is an electrician. And the electrician looks around the house for a while and he says, I see what the problem is. The problem is the wiring. Your house is wired all wrong. We have to rewire the whole thing. That's all that's wrong with this house. And if we do that, everything will work just fine. We're considering the trouble and expense of that, and about that time the plumber arrives. And he says, you know what, your wires are just fine, don't even listen to that. You know what the problem is? The pipes are all messed up. And it's not just a job of roto-rootering or something like that either. You just need to repipe this house completely, all new pipes. But if you'll just do that, everything will be just fine. Okay, already we're seeing a pattern here. And as we're considering that, there's a knock on the door and it's the roofer. And guess what? The roofer says the whole problem is that we need a new roof. We've got the internal environment seeping out and weather seeping in. That's what the problem is. Everything else is just fine. And if we'll just fix that, everything will work out well. All right, next comes in the appliance person. and the appliance person says the roof's fine, the wire's fine, the pipes are fine. Look at these old appliances. How long have you had these things? The stove, the refrigerator, they got to go. The stereo and a couple of the lamps look suspect too. We need new appliances in here, new, modern, energy-efficient ones. That's the ticket. Just do that, and everything will work out fine. Oh my goodness. And then who next? Well, it's the carpenter, and then it's the insulator, the siding person, a windows person, a termite inspector. And we're overwhelmed because we realize we could spend a few $1,000,000 on these repairs, all one by one, and we wouldn't even have a clue if we're addressing the problem or not. And then we think for a second, well, it's easy for those guys to throw around those ideas because they're just going to come in and do what they do and check back out. They don't have to live here. They don't have to live with the consequences of their advice. Hold that thought. All right, so we have been looking at models, specifically healthcare models, the past few shows. Every math and science student, as we have seen, learns the following statement. All models are wrong, but some models are useful. The models that we build to understand these health and healthcare systems, they're not supposed to be either accurate or precise. As we've seen here on Energy Contact, our medical model is supposed to be wrong. The alternative models, they're wrong too. Every one of them. It shouldn't either surprise you or concern you. Some of the greatest scientific discoveries in history have been made with wrong models, limited understandings, faulty perspectives. Remember, our vision is health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, realizing our full potential, having that for everyone. To the extent we're succeeding at that goal, good for us. It doesn't matter what our viewpoint is, we're doing good things. And that's our goal. So knowing that our models are wrong, let's have a quick glance at them anyway. Let's bring up our slide of healthcare models. If you've been watching Energy Contact for a while, you'll recall that on this next slide we're about to get up, where is that slide? That everything on the right-hand side of this column is opposite of everything on the left-hand side. You see there that down the left-hand column is all the philosophies that underpin standard medicine, and on the right side is all the stuff that does alternative medicine. We don't really have time to review all this, but this in a nutshell is what we've been looking at the past few shows. And we're going to leave it up there just for a second, just for you to view those opposites, just so you can have a last peek. It might be the last time we'll visit this subject for a while, so take your last peek now. All right, let's come back up here. Those are some of the many core differences. We just want to keep them in mind as we look at the differences in the way our healers see us. The main problem with all of these different modalities and practices of health care, sickness care, wellness care, trauma care, whatever, the problem with all of this is that they all involve practitioners who fall in love with what they do, who get involved with what they practice, with what they're a practitioner of. Shrinks identify themselves as Freudian or Jungian. Acupuncturists fall in love with acupuncture. Medical doctors fall in love with medical science. Ayurveda practitioners, energy healers, you name it. They get caught up in what they do, regardless of what it is that you need, sometimes even at the expense of what you need. We've spoken of integrative health care on this show. That's where these practices try to work together and work across the lines to help you out. But for the most part, people won't recommend outside of their field. They have trouble dealing with it. Have you ever heard of an MD recommending a crystal healer? It's probably happened somewhere, but not much. They just can't see that far. The reason that surgeon went to surgical school in the first place is long before he got to college age, he decided that that's how he could help people. So you know when you're in his waiting room, when he's looking at your file, he's got that bias going on and he's already looking at where the incisions will go. Cutters cut. It's what they do. Pill prescribers prescribe pills. Chiropractors adjust, and they see everything that could possibly be wrong with you as a function of joints and alignments, subluxations and spinal nerves and such. They bought into it before they even went to school to study. So when healers see you, they objectify you. How can they apply what they do to you? That's what they have on their mind. And you just really want to be aware of that. And by the way, if you start going to these people, you aren't getting any of those opinions for free. Just like your house repair project, each advisor you go to has a bill waiting for you. And it behooves you to stop and pause and consider carefully, because before you go back, they're going to be looking at their next stack of invoices. All right, and so here you are just hearing all these people say what they do. And you're thinking, yeah, I know what you are, but what about me? What am I? I'm just the poor working stiff who's paying your salary. Doesn't that count for anything? Well, unfortunately, sometimes no. And worse, it is ingrained in us not to question. And oftentimes when we go to these folks, we're feeling bad in the first place. We're feeling sick, we're feeling weak, we're confused, and we're looking for somebody who has the answers. Like those guys are perfect or something, we go to them. But they're not perfect. They're very good, but they're not perfect. Like we've seen so many times on Energy Contact, the medical doctor sees us as a body only, void of spirit and energy. The energy healer sees us as spirit and energy, but he forgets that we're flesh and blood, perhaps. Pipes, muscles, gears, things like that. We've seen on Energy Contact that a body without energy is just a corpse. So that doctor is missing something. And energy without a body is a number of cool things. So that energy healer is missing something too, because none of those cool things are human. It's not the body that's all that. It's not the energy that's all that. It's the interface. It's that place where energy contacts the physical self. How can it be that all of these people, all these practitioners on both sides of the practicing fence, that how can it be that they're missing something so simple, so obvious? Well, before we answer that, let's go back and look at a case study. I had a client come to me one time who had been to a bunch of different healers. Matter of fact, it's where I got the idea to do this program. And when I asked what people had told her, she came up with a grocery list. She said that her doctor said she had some sort of blood disorder, and so he wanted to put her on a maintenance prescription. But she didn't want to be on a maintenance prescription, didn't want to be on pills for the rest of her life. So she went to a homeopath, and the homeopath said, well, you've got weak adrenals. And so he ordered her some what he called fortifying herbs and tonics and stuff. And then she went to an acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist said she had kidney dry wind and prescribed Chinese herbs. Then the Ayurveda doctor told her she had a Vata imbalance, and the energy healer told her that her second chakra wasn't rotating properly. As she said, so then I went to a shrink. And the shrink told me, no, it was all in my head. And he prescribed Zoloft for me. Think that's good? Well, not yet. Then she went to the chiropractor and the crystal therapist and the shaman, and they wanted to adjust her and place her in rock fields and sage her and stuff like that. All right, does that story sound familiar? Well, of course it does. It's our field trip story. It's our contractor story, isn't it? There are a few issues developing here. First off, all these caregivers are treating that person the way those construction workers were treating that house. For the sake of this discussion, we're going to assume that every one of them gave her good advice, that they were accurate, that they were legitimate. I have great respect for all of these practices. And all the recommendations were good. The problem is, they all had their own panacea. And the panaceas were off in different directions. They weren't taking her the same direction. So what should she do about that? And if that's not enough, this nice woman had to deal with the fact that she'd sort of made herself now into a doorstep baby. She was an orphan going from door to door. And she was obsessed with finding out what's wrong with herself instead of finding out what was right with herself. And that brought about an hysteria. And this hysteria was complicated by a lack of focus. How is she going to target a solution when she's got all of this stuff dangling in front of her. And now she's so upset she's hyperventilating. And by the way, she had to pay all those people. So not only does she have a clue where to go, but her pocketbook's looking a little worn too. All right, you see the idea. I've explained it now ad nauseum. Too many opinions are often worse than too few. Don't take yourself everywhere. Find a person or two who you can really trust, with whom you can get comfortable with, and focus. Too many doctors or too many alternative caregivers. The result is all the same. And it's not good. Remember, this is not a medical advice show of any kind. And I'm not giving you medical advice. If I have any advice at all to give you with respect to medicine, it's go to your doctor and do what he tells you. But just remember, everybody who looks at you sees through their own limited vista. So do you and I. All of us do. All right, let's take a quantum leap out of these stories for a second. A few shows ago, we looked at the healthcare industry, and we're going to come back and look at some numbers again, just for a second, some economics. You'll recall we saw that the healthcare industry is the largest industry in the United States, with sales of goods and services over 1.6 trillion, and it's growing. Meanwhile, the alternative and complementary industry, which is what they call everything not medical science, is at about 50 billion itself, and it's growing. It's growing even faster than the standard stuff is. And so all told, that's over $2 billion. $2 billion. And it's growing. It's growing. What that means is we're looking for something more. Increasingly, we're looking for something about our health care. And we're looking out there somewhere. So, the search for someone who has all the answers has brought all these people, has brought new things into the marketplace, and it's brought about that search we've been talking about for integrative healthcare, which is a good concept. That integrative healthcare, which means all these guys working together, The doctor working with the Chinese doctor and such. Well, it's good in concept, but it just doesn't play out that well. There's just problems with it. And so, even today, people who have enigmatic health conditions, they'll still go to a doctor or a healthcare provider, and from there, they'll get sent to a series of other specialists and other things, and none of those people will talk to each other. And they have no reason to believe that they should. They think that everything is happening in their own little separate vacuum. That's not integrative healthcare, that's disintegrative healthcare. So, what can we do about it? We're not going to change the way that other people evaluate us. It's a waste of our time. And so we're going to do good just to change ourselves. Let's take another leap, if we can. We're going to go back to where we left off last show. Last show we talked about Einstein. Einstein changed our lives by showing us that there was no difference between mass and energy. Up until his time, nobody believed it, and for 40 or 50 years after his time, nobody still believed it. Even the scientific community, they just couldn't figure out how to prove it. Now we know. It's true. It's true beyond a shadow of a doubt. Matter or energy cannot be created or destroyed, but they can flop back and forth one to another very easily, just like ice can turn into water and water can turn into ice. It's very simple. But Einstein figured that out 100 years ago, and we still don't have the answers with what that means with respect to our health. As revolutionary as he was, Einstein couldn't get something into the equation, and we won't have the whole picture figured out until we figure out how to get it there. So what's missing? Consciousness, awareness. It's necessary for growth and progress. It's necessary for health and evolution. We spend our life trying to change, but we don't even know what we are yet. We don't know who we are yet. And so we feel inadequate. And because we feel inadequate, we go and try to piggyback on someone else's awareness, expecting that someone from the outside will come in and do our work for us. If we would spend more time just discovering who we are and discovering what we are already, then that change, that growth, that self-improvement, that evolution That would be effortless. As a matter of fact, not only effortless, but it would be inevitable. When consciousness gets added to the equation, we just start to get the big picture. But it's not there yet. When that doctor sends you for tests, you're going into tests using Einstein's machines. You got the MRIs and the PETs and the CAT scans and all that stuff. That's Einstein's physics. But as soon as that little ticket spits out its result, that doctor goes back to the 16th century medicine. Einstein ends right there. When you and I make energy contact, we are considering consciousness, the same way those old yogis and those old mystics did 8,000 years ago. All right, let's relate this to some of the stuff that we talked about many shows ago, and to the body intellect we speak about at the beginning of every show. The reason you look the way you look, act the way you act, feel the way you feel, and think the way you think is because you have built yourself to your own specifications. Precisely, meticulously, bit by bit, in detail. Some of my clients are models and actors who come to me sometimes to change their cosmetic appearance. They come to me to change their physical appearance. And I tell them that. I tell them that the reason they look the way they look is because they built themselves that way, and they almost never believe me. They say, why would I build myself in a way that I don't like? Well, the answer is simple. They, and you and I, built ourselves without awareness. We are creations of our own consciousness. But what if we were unconscious when we built ourselves? Well, there you have it in a nutshell. This explains why kind people look kind, why angry people look angry, why sad people look sad. It's easy to figure out once you understand that they're creations of their own consciousness. And it goes deeper into health and appearance than that. There's empowerment in that knowledge, because all you have to do to change your health and your growth and your cosmetic appearance and your spiritual life and everything is to look at yourself, get aware, find the parts that you built without awareness, unbuild them, and rebuild them in your new aware state. You're thinking, is it really that simple? Absolutely. If you can get that aware, it is that simple. We're uncomplicating things. Things are getting easy. And this is great news because it means everything from crippling arthritis to your flabby belly, you can change it. You can do something about it. Think of the money you'll save on surgeries, from plastic surgeries and orthopedic ones to everything. Think of the fact that you won't need to subject yourself to your practitioner's limited perspectives anymore. That's all the time we have for today. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.